this morning, like I've been waking up every morning recently.
By regaining consciousness? Hey, I do that too! Now we can be best friends.
You know, in the midst of incredible political, social, environmental upheaval, I woke up with hope.
I still believe in a place called hope.
Is that really an applause line? Having hope? Okay, either the audience's expectations are spectacularly low, or those applauding believe that having hope is some nigh impossible skill these days.
Women are on the rise. Now, more than any other time, women are speaking out in response to their experiences of gender violence.
Gender violence. I am hearing that term more and more lately. And what exactly distinguishes gender violence from just, say, violence? Can't we all just oppose violence, full stop?
And when I'm talking about gender violence, I mean the cradle to the grave experience of millions of women and girls all around the world. Rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, street harassment.
Street harassment falls into the same category as rape and domestic violence. Got it.
And gender violence is being accomplished by men.
What? Accomplished by men? Like it's an achievement? So, men cannot be raped, or sexually assaulted, or be the victims of domestic violence, as those are all gender violence, and gender violence is accomplished only by men towards women. Is that what I am to understand?
Part of what has made this Women on the Rise so exciting has, of course, as we know, been seen in Hollywood. We've noted women in Hollywood addressing their experiences, and we can trace the effort to end gender violence going back over a path of 400 years, at least, through the efforts of Black and Indigenous women.
An effort to end gender violence over 400 years. An effort to end rape and street harassment. But only through the efforts of Black and Indigenous women. No white, Hispanic, or Asian women have ever rallied against rape or violence against women or harassment. Got it. And I hate to tell you this. I really, sincerely do. But rape will never go away. Unjustified violence will never go away. They are the kinds of sins that the worst of us have committed since time immemorial. And that includes women. Discouraging rape and domestic violence culturally and legally will never go out of style in a civilized society. But the crimes themselves will never be eradicated from occurring, no matter the skin color or the genitals of the people working against them.
In order to understand this current situation, we have been looking a lot at social media. Social media has been an extraordinary tool for us to get a sense of this serious social issue.
Rape and domestic violence were not social issues of consequence until the advent of social media. Got it.
And social media has been wonderful because it has democratized media. In so many ways, it's driving mainstream media. And that voices that we haven't been able to hear before are now being centered.
Or those voices that chose not to speak up for years out of fear over their own careers until it was a brave and righteous time to do so, of course.
Of course!
In order to understand gender violence in North America, we have to understand the role of colonization.
Colonization? Wow! This talk is just a buzzword smorgasbord.
For
The word colonization is its own applause line for this audience. Got it.
From the period of between the 1500s to the 1900s, over 85% of the world's landmass was colonized by a European power. And colonization was largely driven by economic and religious motives. And bringing with colonization was a number of ideas, ideologies, belief systems, again, that were based on religion.
You don't say!
And were, as colonization moved across the earth, bringing illness and bringing a worldview that was different from the people that they encountered.
Religious ideologies, disease, differing worldviews, and rape and domestic violence did not exist anywhere until the Europeans came. Please do tell me that that is where this is going.
And during that time in Europe, around the same era, there was a lot of things happening for women. Women were stratified along class lines, with women of the higher classes being seen in some regard as being more pure than women of lower classes. In so many ways, wealth for women equated purity, virginity, and in so many ways, for women of the lower classes, poverty was synonymous with promiscuity.
Okay. I noticed that you're not providing any evidence for these claims, but sure, for the sake of argument, fine. Rich equals virgin, and poor equals slut. Where are we going with this?
And it began this part around good girls and bad girls. The girls, the women that were deserving of protection by men and the state, and those women and girls that were not. We began to see this split.
Began to see this split during the European colonization. So, there had never been social stratification between the haves and the have-nots. There were no caste systems of social status and perceived value of any kind anywhere else prior to this. All of that was the Europeans' fault. Got it.
Through colonization, the wealthy classes sent explorers to discover new lands, to get wealth for Europe. And in reading the journals of explorers, it's very telling and very revealing some of the belief systems that the explorers had about the women they encountered. As explorers traveled to what we now understand as Africa, Asia, North, Central, South America, the South Pacific, had very specific ideas about women.
Well, they had specific ideas about people they saw as savages and heathens in general, men included. Now, that's not to say that women weren't viewed with any less disdain or treated any better, but why are you leaving Native men out of the equation of victimhood?
The explorers were challenged to see that the women had authority in the communities. That for the most part, communities were working from bases of kinship, which is to say that wherever hierarchies existed, it was not based on gender.
Uh-huh. So, different cultures are different. Well, thanks for that. And is this meant to imply that the native cultures they discovered were then superior in some fashion? There was no slavery or mistreatment of women or inequity of any kind among those native cultures? Now, I'm no cultural anthropologist, so I have no idea. But then, so far as I can tell, neither is our speaker, who is only noted as being trained in counseling as well as being a feminist activist and a director of a battered women's center. And not to begrudge any of the good work she may be doing through her counseling, but I am not convinced that she knows what she is talking about when it comes to tribal cultures of the New World.
Women had autonomy. Women had sexual autonomy.
All women in tribal cultures had sexual autonomy. Got it.
There was a number of different kind of understandings that the explorers struggled with in seeing the power that women had in all of the areas that they'd been.
Such as... Are you going to get any more specific? And yes, okay, we get it. Never before seen peoples were different from the Europeans' experience. So what?
And the explorers wrote about how they beat and raped the women that they encountered.
Yes, many of the European explorers were conquering and marauding monsters who saw the native peoples as dumb savages to both use and abuse. And I ask again, so what? Such behaviors were unique only to Europeans? No other human beings in the history of the world ever acted in such a way prior to that? Have you ever read the Bible by any chance?
In so many ways, baking in sexual violence before nation states were even created.
The actions of the European explorers baked in sexual violence to be a part of future nation states. Got it.
A big piece around this part was a huge part about heteronormativity.
Okay. Yes. Heterosexuality is the norm. So what?
And this idea of gender socialization. And that when we are being, through the colonization process, learning about what it means to be a woman and to be a man, the gender binary became a part of this process.
This process. What process? Colonialism? Or gender roles? I'm confused.
It is said in some places that we don't have gender, that we practice it. Every day we get up and we put on our gender.
And this is where I would play a clip from the song Detachable Penis by King Missile, but I'd likely risk a copyright strike. Anyway, it is said in some places that we don't have gender, that we practice it. So, where are those places? And how many is some? And if gender is just a pair of pants that you pull on, why don't all women just pull on the pants of men to avoid all of these patriarchal hardships?
It's a performance to a point, but it's also a part of our socialization in that we are sanctioned to the degree to which we practice our gender correctly.
Sanctioned. We are sanctioned to practice our gender correctly. By whom, might I ask? And who exactly was it that sanctioned you to grow your hair out that long, to wear that makeup, and to put on that dress.
Another critical piece in thinking about colonization, in addition to gender socialization, is the enslavement of Africans.
By other Africans?
African enslavement as an economic driver of Europe was not a cottage industry. This was developed a huge amount of wealth for Europe. And through that process, significant pieces around African women.
So we're just going to set aside the enslavement of African men. Got it.
Baking in the subjugation, the torture, and the rape of African women.
Baking in. There's that phrase again. So the rape, subjugation, and enslavement of African women is a permanent feature of European culture and nation states. Is that what I am to understand? Okay, then do tell me of the legal and active and abundant slave trade at work in the European Union during the current year. I'll wait for you to gather up those numbers for me.
As I talked earlier about the stratification of European women, upper class, lower class, what we began to see now was a stratification of women based on class, and that to be virtuous was to have the least amount of melanin in the skin.
Yes, and racial differences being used to divvy up people, female or otherwise, as being on one side of the societal line or the other had never happened prior to European colonization. There were certainly no racially fueled tribal conflicts in either North America or Africa prior to the arrival of the Europeans. Got it.
Moving toward contemporary times. And we look at media representations, where we see over and over again that part of what it means to practice our gender for men is to have authority over women in some regard.
Moving toward contemporary times and skipping over 500 plus years of cultural and civil advancement because the media of today reflects the exact same mindset as existed during European colonization. Because, it's baked in, after all. Also, men are horrible, but gender is a practice. So men are only men if they choose to be evil men. Therefore, men are willfully evil unless our speaker says otherwise. Got it.
There are 4 ways that men interact with the issue of violence against women.
Oh boy, a list! I love lists. They make for such easy commentary breaks.
1 is to use power and control. One of the key lessons of the colonization process was baking in the practice of power over and control of people and determining who was deserving of protection and who was not. In relation to gender violence and men relating in terms of power and control is to do things in terms of isolation and gaslighting and emotional abuse.
Okay, so men are power-hungry, emotionally abusive manipulators who both feel entitled and justified in mistreating women because the European explorers baked in those behaviors as acceptable in our modern society. Got it.
The second way that men interface with the issue of violence against women is to be a bystander. Silent bystander in some instances, which is to say they actually know that there's a problem. They see it, they're silent, Maybe they do not address it with their friends or their family. They may not be participating in it, but they're observers, not taking action.
So, if men are not abusing women in some fashion, then they are at least still enabling such behavior because they are consciously practicing blissful ignorance when it comes to violence against women. Because it's happening everywhere. Because it's baked in. Which makes me wonder, if it is baked in, how could there be any men who are not actively taking part in violence against women?
The third way that men interface with the issue of violence against women is to be a good guy. Good guy. That's nothing wrong with a good guy. A good guy in this instance is a man who will help an individual woman. Maybe, help her move, maybe loan her money, might go give a guy a talking to. He recognizes that there's a problem, and he is not necessarily going to take action on it beyond helping that individual.
So, even if a man tries to help a woman in need, he's still not doing enough. Well, what more should he be doing? How much more should a man involve himself in a woman's life and erode her own autonomy? I am awfully curious to know the answer to that one.
The fourth way that men interface with the issue of violence against women is to be an activist.
Let me guess. This is the ultimate and most virtuous way in which men should behave. Well, do tell me, what actions shall bring me closer to sainthood?
An activist is a man who's decided that he has stake in the effort to end violence against women. He may have witnessed his mother experiencing abuse. He may know that violence and gender violence happened in his family with another relative. He may have friends. He may have been, gender violence may have been invisible to him for most of his life, and he became attuned because Hollywood's now paying attention.
I thought that violence against women was baked into our society. How could any man avoid it? How could any man avoid committing it to one degree or another?
An activist is the man who decides, I have a stake in this, and begins to take action.
What kind of action? Because the good guy who took action apparently wasn't good enough, since you differentiate between him and an activist. So, what defines an activist?
Every 6 days, a woman in Canada is killed by her male partner.
Okay. Stipulated. And whether a woman is killed every 6 days or every 60 days, that's still one life too many. But, and at the risk of sounding insensitive, so what? And why pick as specific a metric as killed by their male partner? Because when it comes to homicides in general in Canada, year to year, men are murdered 2 to 3 times more often than women. So if women's lives are as devalued by a baked-in standard as you claim, if men are so powerful in society as compared to women, why are men more often the victims of violent crime? And if violence against women is so baked into society, then why is killing a woman illegal?
On any given day, 1 in 5 children has witnessed their mother's abuse. 1 in 5 children in a classroom has witnessed their mother's abuse.
Okay. And are you going to talk at all about the number of women who abuse their children? Or who abuse their male partners? Now, given the lower likelihood of men reporting such abuse, and given the relative lack of support for male victims of domestic violence, we can't really know how many men are truly the victims of such abuse as compared to women. But I will grant you that it is probably a lower total. But, again, so what? How many men need to be abused by their wives before we can just say that domestic violence needs to be addressed full stop, and not divvy up our concerns or attentions on the basis of gender?
We have, in so many ways, an epidemic. It's been baked in to our culture. It's been baked into all of our interactions.
Baked in to all of our interactions. Men physically abusing women is a part of all of our interactions. All of them. Got it.
And in talking to men over the years, what I've heard is that they're trying to find a way to enter into this. How can I step up and take action? Recognizing that in doing so, they would be violating the so-called bro code.
The bro code. The bro code condones violence against women. Well, golly, I must have missed that memo. But then, I don't know what the facts are. Please do tell me how many men do not act to report or intervene in the abuse of women. And then please do tell me the total of how many women also do not report or act to prevent violence against men. I would love to see our speaker prove a negative that shows an epidemic trend of male non-behavior.
Recognizing that there is social sanctioning around that, because that is not what you do when you're practicing your gender correctly.
Practicing the male gender correctly means to keep silent about the abuse of women when one is aware of its occurrence. Got it. Golly, I am glad to be told how to act like a real man, because I am horrible at it by our speaker's metrics.
And so the taking action in terms of the relationships, building more awareness for themselves, taking action within communities and within the larger society is something that many men are doing today. Many brave men are recognizing that they have a stake in this, that this matters to them, that the future of us as a species is to look at these very human relationships, to look at it in a very personal way, and to own a role.
Yes, because men naturally lack humanity, introspection, or personal concern when it comes to relationships. Only brave men buck the trend of the correct way to be male and defy their natural instincts to beat up and murder women. Got it.
I started by saying that this was a time of hope.
Well, you could have fooled me. Apparently, I am a natural-born lady killer because of European colonialism. What hope can there be for all of the monsters out there who are just like me?
And I think about all of us, as women right now, who are, in so many ways, continuing and standing in our power and using our voice, pushing back on what has been historical oppression.
By vilifying all men.
Challenging ourselves to take action and to support each other.
By seeing each other as inherent and inevitable victims and viewing men as broken human beings who require fixing in order to defy their murderous instincts.
It is an exciting time. And in the long history of resistance by, as I mentioned before earlier, Indigenous and Black women through colonization and resisting the sexual violence that was a part of the relationship through colonization, that the front line has been there, the very beginning.
I have absolutely no idea what our speaker is talking about. Associating herself, or women today, with the circumstances of Native and tribal women at the time of colonization, pretending as though the deeds and cultural norms of half a millennium ago are being practiced in Western civilization today, I just cannot fathom how our speaker navigates the world holding the men of today accountable for the crimes of centuries dead strangers.
And today, each and every one of us is beginning to recognize that we also have a stake, that this matters to all of us in some regard, and that the front line is here at our feet. Thank you.
Rape is a crime, punishable by law. Domestic abuse is a crime, punishable by law. Murder is a crime, punishable by law. Those are the things which are baked into our society. This is why rapists and wife-beaters and murderers are not particularly well thought of by the overwhelming majority of Western civilization. And yet, according to our speaker, we all live in an endless hellscape of barbarism and modern colonialism where correctly performed masculinity requires the abuse of women, as well as a gender-enforced code of silence regarding such crimes. A reality where men only come in 4 flavors: villains, villain enablers, faulty good guys, and activists. And though we're never told exactly what makes a man an activist as opposed to a good guy, there's still a 50% chance that your average man is simply not doing enough to help women, and a 25% chance that they are an outright violent monster. So remember, men, whatever you are doing, it is not enough. And what is enough? Well, we'll never know, because that would indicate a clear goal. And if there was a clear goal, then there would be a finish line. And we cannot have a finish line because then we will have actually accomplished something good. So until then, guys, take heart in the one thing that is an accomplishment for men.
And gender violence is being accomplished by men.
As always, thank you for watching.